So welcome everyone, those of you that are listening to this recording. We're so glad that you're here in the Zoom space. We're so glad of you listening to this recording. You each are valued and hope that you walk away with something valuable today. And so with that, I want to say, get ready for it. Welcome to our 149th online gathering for congregational leaders across the country. This weekly gathering is called Courageous Leadership, and it's sponsored by ELCA's coaching ministry. I'm Jill Beverlin. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the program manager for this ministry and one of your facilitators today. As part of my traditional land acknowledgement, something different's coming, friends. I would like you to know that today I'm talking to you from the Lutheran Center in Chicago. This city specifically acknowledges the contributions of the Kirihatha and of the Potawatomi in fostering the community that has become Chicago. We acknowledge all Native peoples who came before us and who continue to contribute to this city and each of the communities that we live in. We are committed to the truth and healing movement and promoting Native cultural heritage. So with that, friends, I also want you to know that as we step into our time today, I encourage us to remember that we are seeking to create a safer and braver space in these gatherings for you to bring the truth of who you are and how you are doing. These conversations are meant to be an intentional step for us to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ. So Frederick Buechner once said, "The place God calls you to is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hunger meet." Our speaker's journey in life is a beautiful example of this quote, and it also has led to beautiful fruit being given to the world. Our friend and colleague, Phoebe Morad, has been drawn to the intersection of faith and environment since college, where she had an open-minded, agnostic political science professor challenge her to explore how spirit-led movements could make an impact in civic debates around eco-justice. She got to work with a citizen science research organization known as Earthwatch, and then got to help communities build homes with their neighbors in Habitat for Humanity in 2010. And it was there that she was introduced to Lutherans for Restoring Creation. This is a grassroots movement in the ELCA led by clergy, lay people, campus ministers, outdoor camp staff, and seminary professors, and it offers a support system to connect, empower, and equip one another. That has some real strong echoes of coaching, by the way. So in 2017, this network became an official nonprofit with a vision to promote the integration of care for creation into the full life of the church. So now, as the executive director of LRC, Phoebe gets to lift up stories from across the ELCA and help leverage the assets of our affiliate organizations. She also facilitates a global virtual certificate course at Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary, which encourages faith-based action as part of the Center for Climate Justice and Faith. When she's not on Zoom meetings, she's either walking her dog, petting a cat, carting her busy kids around, or watching a comedy with her husband. She lives just outside of Boston, and I also want you to know she's very brave. I once witnessed her go on an outdoor roller coaster in Las Vegas. Maybe it was midnight. I don't know. You know what they say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but now I've just released part of the story.
That rule. So.
So with that, Phoebe, so glad to have you with us today.
No, thank you so much for having me. And it's funny that you referenced, I think you called me a fruit. I think somehow or another you called me a fruit, which is good. Because I was imagining, I realized it, maybe almost a decade ago, I met you and Janice, and imagining how well grounded the coaching ministry has become from the first time coaching was even mentioned to me. Just to see what has been created and how firmly your roots have merged with others to create this network that was so needed during the time and just continues to bear fruit. Here we are, a bunch of fruit. So thank you so much for all of the work that all of you have done across the country and globe. And I'm really honored to share some space with you today. And I do feel grateful that it happened to be now that Jill and Jason had asked me to join this call, because I have to say, they literally asked me, I think just after I was coming off of a 4-day retreat in the woods. And it was a retreat that was kind of prescribed, and I thought I'd get more done because I had stuff on my to-do list to do during a retreat, because that's what you're supposed to do on retreat. Thankfully, it was led by the Center for Spirituality and Nature, which I'll send you all a link to. They really forced us to be outside and shut up and listen. And I did so, and it was really good for me. And as we closed hearing this, it's an article from December 22. And I want to share it with you to open, because this is the secret in creation care. I know a lot of you have heard about climate disaster and chaos and how to reduce carbon, and there are lots of how-tos in this business of creation care. And this is one that is more about how we're human beings than human doings. So I have finally been coming around to the idea that the best thing we can do for the planet is to slow down, just slow down, which is really hard to wrap your mind around. So this is by Laura Johnson. I'm only going to read part of it, so I'll send you the link. Why rest in urgent times? I want everything to pause. I want us to pause long enough to notice the patterns of harm and the systems of oppression that continue to multiply. And I want us to pause long enough to recognize our responsibility to interrupt them. I want us to pause long enough to make space for our grief. That was from Michelle Cassandra Johnson in Finding Refuge, Heart Work for Healing Collective Grief. It's clear that our times are urgent. Growing social and environmental crises everywhere, linked at their deep cultural roots, squeeze us from all sides. Scientists have been telling us for years that our time to act is dwindling, nearly gone, already gone. In such urgent times, should not our response be similarly urgent? Should we not move faster, yell louder, do more? Why then does Bayo Akamolafe advise that the times are very urgent, we must slow down? Why is Michelle Cassandra Johnson calling for a pause? Why are Octavia Rahim and Tricia Hersey advising for rest? Adrienne Marie Brown for pleasure and slowness? As she puts it in Emergent Strategy, there is such urgency in the multitude of crises we face, it can make it hard to remember that, in fact, it is the urgency thinking that got us into this point, and that our potential success lies in going deep, slow, intentional. Urgency thinking, scarcity thinking, the logic of capitalism. There isn't enough, not enough time, not enough space, not enough resources. So then we'll take what we can. We'll accumulate as much as we can and enclose it within borders and fences and walls. We'll control and compete. We'll be productive and efficient. Rest is lazy, emotions are fragile, the earth is dead. Pleasure is for later, or not meant for me. For centuries, these myths have put the world and living, breathing bodies into production for accumulation of wealth for the elite, power for the few, disposability for the many. The myth of scarcity has led us to this urgent and heartbreaking place where we live in the stress response, disembodied, shallow breath, nervous systems fried, rest deprived. There isn't enough time, we say, no time to feel the collective grief that grows as we try to turn away. We're separate, fragmented, isn't that what they say? Why then would I feel this pain for the earth and other beings? Consider, might this be a sign of our innate compassion, of interconnection and interdependence? The tugs and taps of consciousness, relational awareness, whispers of deep knowing and community care. As Malkai Devich Cyril says, grief is the opposite of indifference. Oh, well, what am I supposed to do with that? It's too much, and anyway, there still isn't enough time. But what if there were? What if the truth was abundance? What if pausing, slowing down, feeling could re-embed this truth in our bodies and in the world? What if we could soften into this spaciousness? Can we imagine? What if right now we could pause, take a full breath, relax our jaw, feel our heart, let our minds quiet, our bodies rest. There. This is your invitation. Rest is an abundance practice, writes Octavia Rahim. It is inherently spacious. Rest increases your capacity to be with and feel all of your feelings. Rest increases your capacity for true intimacy, pleasure, and joy. So let us rest. You are invited. Let us rest to feel and metabolize the heavy emotions, vital feedback, deep reminders, wisdom holders, sacred guides. Let us rest to deprogram from grind culture and urgency thinking, to regulate our nervous systems so that we might process and be transformed. Let us rest to wake up and wake down, returning to our bodies and through them to the earth. Let us rest to disrupt capitalism and its intertwined systems of supremacy and oppression, colonialism, white supremacy, patriarchal, heterosexism, anthropocentrism. Let us interrupt them. Let us rest to remember abundance, to notice the beauty and magic all around us, to open to wonder and awe. Let us rest to cultivate softness and spaciousness in our bodies and in the world. Let us rest to process our compounded grief as ritual, relational practice, liberatory pathway. Let us rest for resilience so that we can show up for the deep intentional work of our times. Let us rest, as Tricia Hersey says, because it is our birthright, because we are alive, and that is enough. She does go on, but I wanted to share all of that because I felt like it was such a gift. And I do invite you, and I'm going to ask Jason to pull up the Lutherans Restoring Creation invitation, which is a little bit more of a visual invitation, but this is exactly what we're inviting people not to do, but how to be with each other. Thank you, Jason.
Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free."
I'm not seeing anything
Here are
yet.
the facts.
There it is. But there's a big black
These are true, and I don't feel
thing
free.
in front. Does that matter?
I feel buried under facts. And while it is a fact that the world is getting dangerously hotter, that humans are to blame, and that we are running out of time, there's more to be said than can fit in the trend line of parts per million atmospheric analysis and the background extinction rate and congressional deadlocks and fossil fuel subsidies. The Earth is good. And it's not naive to believe that that fact matters just as much as the others. The Earth is good, and it is worth saving. It's worth serving. This world is worth serving. Isn't it worth believing in? Christians have a stubborn belief that the ultimate truth of the world is healing. That isn't a denial of death or woundedness. It's a refusal to let those facts crowd out the whole truth. The world in fear and despair and pain is in desperate need of faith, hope, and love. And so are we. These are gifts that God offers lavishly, foolishly, abundantly. We cannot do the work of serving this world if we are not rooting ourselves in the gifts that we need most of all. This is a call to everyone who feels buried alive under the weight of the climate disaster, who mourns what we have lost and fears what is to come. Do not do this alone. Faith, hope, and love are not luxuries. They are as essential as food and water and air. So come to the table, to the water, to the Spirit of the one who loves you. Receive the love that you hope to give, wounded hand to wounded heart. May God Creator bless you and keep you. Amen.
Thank you. So I have some stuff from Lutherans Restoring Creation I could share with you, but I think I'd really like to start hearing from you all as to some of your questions and some of maybe your first responses to when you hear the phrase creation care. As far as feeling invited, do you mostly feel invited in tearing your hair out because you feel like the house is on fire? What are some of your invitations to this work that you've responded to thus far? I'd like to hear a little, because it's a nice small group. I'd love to hear a little bit more from you before I share any more stuff. I just gave you a lot.
Well, hi,
So-
Phoebe. I just was going to say that one of the things that is so clear to me growing up on a farm in Nebraska from years and years ago, that the most I ever felt God was always outside at night, feeling the breeze at sunset. And so that image, huge trees, the oak tree I'd walk by on the way out to the field, those images just are places I go back to in my mind all the time. And thinking about the goodness of the soil, the goodness of being out in that freedom. And to me, that image, wherever it is, holds strong when I do work like coaching and working with people who are tangling with issues. But most of the issues that I hear about are people issues, trying to get the group started, trying to get the group to budge because we have different angles that we're trying to work in this group, whatever the case may be. And so I tend to think about a lot of things are human issues, even though they're impacting the earth. The earth is good. And so I guess that's where I always feel like I come out of that abundance of the beauty and the greatness that God gave us. And whatever work we do, most of it is human work. Even though I do understand, the pollution, and those are real issues, and the tainting of our air like we have right now with the smoke, fog, haze in St. Louis. But anyway, those things come to mind as I think about it. So, others, somebody else was going to go next.
So when I heard that term, my mind first went to my son, who's a student at Princeton Theological Seminary with its farminary. It's a farm that's used for theological reflection. He's also very into creation care. But also I think of creation care, as was referenced, is all of creation, including human care. And we have about 2 blocks from here, there is a otherwise blank green space, but partially occupied by a community garden with several plots. And my first year into this parish, I decided we'd take some of our folks out and bless that garden at the beginning of the growing season, for whatever that act may produce, both spiritually and fruitfully, physically. So just a couple of thoughts.
For me, when I'm hearing this, I often connect with kind of an all or nothing experience when it comes to creation care. It's either small and here's a small packet of seeds and take it home and good luck with you, or the sky is falling and we're out for a protest. There doesn't seem to be that kind of middle ground of like this accompaniment experience. And for me as a deacon, that level of accompaniment of how do we walk together intentionally day by day to live something and fulfill this creation care out loud. Like, what does that even look like? And I'm back in California now, and I remind myself, like, about 20 years ago, we were in a terrible drought, and there were signs everywhere that were like, conserve water, and taught us how to turn off the water faucet when we were washing our hands, right? Like really specific, intentional things that we all live by and participate in a communal kind of way. And so I'm curious about more of that type of experience of, as you talked about, having rest or patience or care for ourselves. Like, how do we do that on a regular basis so it becomes a habit and we can all do this collectively?
Oh, I see lips moving. Alicia, is that you?
I don't know if Felicia was getting ready to
All
go. Felicia, are you trying to speak? Can you give us a wave if you are? Yeah, okay. Jason, do you have any support that you can offer Felicia to get unmuted?
Okay,
Oh, there you go.
I'm unmuted.
Yay.
Okay, I agree with everybody that said something already. I remember as a young girl, my dad loved to have a garden. He had a garden. He raised corn and potatoes right here in Chicago in the backyard, and greens. And my grandmother, she was on the other side growing roses. And I was like, this is crazy. But I noticed how, as they were both working on the garden, this creation, they were at peace. And I found my dad oftentimes talking to God, his little prayers. And my grandmother was telling the roses what to do and how to do it. And I'm like, that's crazy. And I would always end up being out there helping them, getting my hands dirty. But I realized that it's just something about growing things and creating things. And it makes you really think. And as I got older, I fell in love with the water, going to the beach or going to the lake and just standing there or sitting there and just praying and asking God, what's next? And so I learned from my dad and them, but I didn't continue with the garden, but I understand now why they did it and what they did it for.
I love gardening as well. And I live in a condo, so when I get to the lake space, I take advantage of the gardening. However, at the lake, there are lots of creatures who are in need of food, and they tend to take advantage of my plants. So initially I was like kind of ticked because I was like, okay, my marigolds were looking so great around the light pole, and all of a sudden a wild turkey decides he's going to unplant them and nest in that space. I planted them 3 times again, and they're not doing as well as they did because they've been a little bit damaged. But there's also part of me that's like, okay, if you need it that bad, turkey, let's let it go. So I finally got to that point after all of the things that I had thought were deer resistant or creature resistant were going to do okay up there. I just recognized they're all part of this process and just let it go. So, but that's been a growth area for me this year.
So Tammy, your story reminds me, Dave and I were running at a nature center. On Saturdays, we typically try to run in some different nature centers around where we live. And for the very first time, I saw a baby turkey. So with this gift of a turkey choosing to nest in your marigolds, you too may get, and maybe you've already seen a baby turkey. I thought it was pretty stinking cute. And except for the dad charged me, like did the whole beautiful feather thing and thought I was a threat, so charged me. That part was not fun. But the babies themselves are very cute. And the other thing that I would like to say about caring for creation and where I live is that there's a private university just down the road from where Dave and I live, and they have a garden. Part of one of their classes is teaching specific gardening techniques. And they have, what is it called when you raise bees? There's a word for that. They have that, whatever
What's
that.
the buzz? What are you talking about? What's
So the thing that I love about this garden area is that this private university encourages the community to bring their vegetable scraps, like to keep canisters on their kitchen counters and bring vegetable scraps and add to their compost pile. And they had this cute little platform where you can go and dump your vegetable scraps. So we have a container on our kitchen counter, and what we used to call waste, we now look at something as life-giving, right? It's not something that's just icky and discarded. It's something that God takes and has a system put in place in creation, right? To break it down to become the nutrients and literally the soil for this new food to grow in. And there's a sermon in there.
That's I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just say there's a sermon in there. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, it was a perfect illustration of what I especially love what Felicia said about she asked God, what's next? Like compost is a perfect example of what's next. And it's up to God. And it's not us. But we do have to have a relationship where we don't treat things like waste, and that there isn't just a way. You know, when you throw something away, where is a way? So I really appreciated hearing all that and how many different stories you had, because yeah, we might not all have a positive relationship with nature. I mean, when you consider so many people right now can't just walk outside and breathe without a mask on. How many people might have had their homes completely destroyed by water, might not have a positive reaction to their waterways at the moment. We all have very different relationships with creation, depending on what season of life we're in, what our history is, what our family history is, and not to just assume that we should all become tree huggers, because that's the way we should be in best really. That's not what we're asking for. We're asking for a better relationship with all of creation, which includes each other. And that accompaniment model, JJ, I'm glad you brought up, because what I will share of some stuff that we've learned as a network of Lutherans Restoring Creation. Do I have time to share my screen for a little bit, Jill, before we break out? How are we doing? Okay, all right. I'm going to share my screen just to give some, and it helps to hear from you all as to what you might want more of, because we do have a very large, full website. It's so full that it's hard to get through. So I'd love to select some things and links to send you all as a follow-up. But you're invited. And the idea with a lot of what's on our website is that it's reactive. It's where we ask people who have done great things to share it. But sometimes you might need an usher to find yourself there. A couple of things that we've noticed recently is that it's hard to get any kind of conversation going at church without it being contentious or without you necessarily putting it all on your pastor, who really sometimes is just trying to do their job, and oftentimes asking the pastor to do more is not going to be faith fueling. So what we're asking what we're inviting people to do is really start listening to what's going on in your community. And we have a few resources to do that. So I'll send you these links. But oftentimes it's to remember that most of the experts that you have are within your community. They might not even be outside of your church walls. But if you can find out what's really giving your church life and simply put a different layer an ethos lens on what you're doing, that can bring a whole other level of relationship to whatever it is you're doing. So if you're hosting a potluck, or you have a gathering, to do some mindful eating. That's one way to put an eco lens on what you're doing. And think about things rather than from a shame perspective, think about things proactively about where could we go visit these various farmers market in your community and share recipes. Rather than sitting around a potluck and saying, gee, we really shouldn't be eating meat. And why are we eating off of styrofoam? You really have to consider timing in your relationship with your fellow church members before you start making those kind of judgments. So again, the biggest invitation is to listen to each other. If you find that you don't have anybody right in your midst that is an expert or really excited about gardening or really excited about compost, know that we have on our website a map. And so again, we don't have a website that wants you to stay on our site. We have a website that points you in the direction of people. So on our site, you'll see a map with a lot of dots on it. You can filter things out. You can, just a little plug here, there are a number of wonderful creation care coaches that know about coaching and know a little bit more about the content to be able to help people that are building green teams. So you click a button and find all the creation care coaches across the country. If you want somebody to just come and do a talk at your church, especially because it's not you, you can click a button to see how many creation care ambassadors are around. They've taken a course that helps communicate climate issues with a faith lens. So use this. Our whole website is kind of meant to connect you with people and get you off of the computer, get you onto a relationship with someone and off of the computer. So we'll just highlight those two things, but also let you know that what we're growing right now is we've always had the foundation of our curriculum as Lutherans Restoring Creation has been thinking about your response to creation care and your creation care work as just part of your daily church life. So all of the committees, well, not everybody is lucky enough to have all of these standing committees in church, but you typically have somebody that does facilities, somebody that does worship and music, a group of people in Chris Ed. Think about those pillars of existing church life and just offer some tools, some resources, some fun things to do that have to do with creation care, rather than thinking you have to develop a whole separate green team. You already have people in your midst doing stuff, just offer them some cool resources. So that's what this curriculum based on these pillars of the 5 pillars of typical church life is. We now have an online, we have this as a PDF. If you want to print something out and be old school, that is perfect. It works for a lot of people. If you wanted to watch that quick video that we watched at the beginning after coffee hour, and then ask about the earth is good, what are we going to do about it? And then go through this online, I'll skip this part. It's an online kind of quiz as to what things are we already doing in these areas? What things do we want to try this year? You could just have, a handful of you drinking coffee after church and think, yeah, what are we going to try? What's nice about this online, again, is not that it makes you bring out a device, but the fact that it's going to show up immediately with a cohort of all these other churches that have said, yeah, I want to do something. So then you can filter through and find out what other churches want to do an energy audit or already have solar. So this is the part that Lutherans Restoring Creation tries to connect people that have already done stuff with each other. A little bit more specifically and tool oriented than accompaniment writ large. That's where coaching comes in. But I just wanted to highlight that we're not trying to get too data heavy or keep people on screens. Most of the purpose is to connect with one another. And Janice, I wanted to highlight too, if you want to speak at all about the coaching ministry specific to creation care, I'll give you the floor for a moment if you don't mind. I kind of.
Well, thank you, Phoebe. I know some of you are aware of this and know about it. We are currently having a group go through. These are level 1 coaches who have accomplished that level and are looking for the specialty track. And so out of all the ELCA coaching tracks you can do, Care for Creation is one of them. And Phoebe has been instrumental since helping put together the core curriculum. And we do update that from time to time. And I started a list, Phoebe, the other day, because as we continue to talk about sort of the fear or the anxiety that comes out of trying to wrestle with these huge issues, it's a thing for people to figure out who are doing this work, how to manage that grief that they sometimes feel or concerns. We beefed it up a couple of years ago because we know the advocacy area needed much more work in public witness to help people who are maybe fairly content with doing something just at their own church or in their own group, maybe in their own community, but to really push it out and get involved with maybe networks. Those were areas that people find it's like a giant leap from going where they are and trying to live out their faith and needed some additional resources. So Phoebe's a great resource, and all of almost everything that we use as part of Care for Creation comes from Lutherans Restoring Creation website. We've walked this journey together, and I'm grateful, Phoebe, for your work, and it makes the work in creation care coaching that much stronger because we're always going back there and pointing out some new resources that are there. So if you're not a coach or you want to explore further, it is well worth your time. And I offer recommendations to many other pastors who are looking to preach sometimes, and they want to they don't want to always just start with the problems or the crises. They do want to get fundamental worship materials, and they're there. So thank you, Phoebe.
That's a great segue. I just wanted to also highlight, since there's a lot of stuff on our site, to connect to one another. If you want it every month, we have a call somewhat similar to this, but it's at night. It's only once a month, and we've been doing it for a few years now, where we lift up certain stories and experiences from a lot of different vantage points. So the Connections Call library would be fun to at least scroll through. But we also, for pastors, have a lectionary archive. So any lectionary commentaries, it's through all 3 seasons. So if you are, wondering, gee, you can only talk about caring for the earth on Earth Day. No, every single reading, really, we have somebody that's written a commentary about how it connects to caring for each other through how we care for the planet. So those are a few things to highlight. I don't know if that was too much information, but I want to make sure you all have time to talk to each other, as you usually do. So
thank you, Phoebe. And I see that we do have one participant with his hand raised, John Otto. If we can have John's question, and then we can go to breakout rooms for a few minutes.
Yeah, I have two questions. As some of us know, there are a national coalition of Christians involved in ecology. I'm curious how your organization relates to those coalitions. I'm thinking primarily of the one that has power in the name.
Interfaith Power and Light.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other question is, obviously, at some points, to work for a better ecology, we have to engage in political questions. And is that something you encourage congregations to slowly approach? Or do you have congregations that are actually engaged in policy questions, local and national, that relate to the well-being of our earth?
So to both questions, yes. But the first one, as far as how we relate, kind of on that map, we want to highlight especially the local organizations, and Interfaith Power and Light often will have a very active local affiliate. So we certainly usher people to their local affiliate of Interfaith Power and Light. They're really great with knowing how to save money and find local funding to reduce their energy usage. So they're incredible with that. Meanwhile, there's Green Faith, which is a global organization that is great with actually getting people out to vote, but getting people in the street to immerse themselves in what it means to love neighbor, how this is part of the work. And loving neighbor is to be a public citizen and constantly push. So to relate to that work, we want people to meet, again, listen first to their community. And if as in my community, I happen to go to a church where people, the Interfaith Power and Light, this will give you an idea. The Interfaith Power and Light symbol, or the logo, has a turbine in it. That was too political for my congregation. So I took my faith and went to some other groups and, like, you know, stayed with my congregation, love them to death, get to sing with them and make beautiful music. And I also show up with my God's Work Our Hands shirt when I go to a climate rally. Yeah. So there's definitely both. And I don't want to lose the relationships, and I want to keep building the relationships I have personally in my church, and keep working on them, just like you do with family members at Thanksgiving, right? So it's both. And I just really encourage people to really listen before launching into something that can only seem political. If it can be about neighbor love and start there, I find that people can go a lot further.
Our Catholic sisters and brothers have a national program that's pushing the study and implementation of Laudato Si.
Yes.
Do you have any relationship to that program?
Yeah, I've highlighted it a few times, and there's somebody in seminary that actually made like a Lutheran study guide to go along with the Laudato Si. If I can try to find that and send it to you as well. But most of the time, we just try to highlight what other things are going on. We don't need to reinvent anything.
I'm locally considering trying to relate Catholic and Lutheran congregations to study that document.
Oh, I'll send that for sure. Yeah.
And John, I want you to know that related to political discussions, our advocacy team intentionally trains up fellows, interns, around the area of climate policy. And I know this very well because someone who came through my youth group when I was still serving at the local level now has her master's degree and is living in the state of California. And one of her jobs is helping the state of California write this type of policy and to construct initiatives to help the public become more aware of how they can influence creation care through how they vote. So we in the ELCA do have specific ways that we try to address that. And so our advocacy team can also be a space when we've engaged in the relationship building that Phoebe has so wisely pointed out. We do have resources to just help educate ourselves about what is it like in our area, because who knows unless you interact with the people that have boots on the ground and are impacting that and in conversation on a daily, weekly basis with our politicians. Phoebe, how do you feel about sending people to breakout rooms with like 1 or 2 questions? Oh,
sure.
One. Jason says 1.
Jason, you pick one. I forget what questions I had.
I'll go ahead and open the rooms and then broadcast the question into them. That way I'll have a few minutes at least.
Welcome back to the space, friends. I hope that you enjoyed your conversation. So we have 5 minutes to unpack. I need 60 seconds or a little bit longer at the end to get us set for next week and what's happening there. But I want to know, what are some themes or some learnings that bubbled up for you in your small group conversation time? Pastor Felicia, we see you unmuted.
Yeah, oh, I was just trying to unmute so that I could hear. I couldn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
What are some themes or some learnings that bubbled up for you in your small group conversation time?
That we all were still approaching and trying to find out which way to go. And some things we've done so far are good, but it's still room for more.
Always room for more. Love it. Thank you for sharing that. Connecting and share solutions to help give reliefs. Yeah. Excellent. Tammy.
We talked about the solar array that our congregation in northern Minnesota is going to be installing, and we also talked about the solar farm a part of our family farm has leased the property for solar farming, and so that's we talked about that. And then I just talked about one of my snags is I want to compost, but our condominium doesn't actually. It does a lot of recycling, and it's a LEED certified building, so it it aligns that way, but it doesn't have composting. Our city does, so I would have to. It's just the hassle factor, right, of collecting and taking it to a different site, and I just haven't gotten beyond that. But that's one of my next goals. So.
Good for you. You know what, Tammy, what I do, I have a special bike bag, and I put my compost thing in my bike bag, and I ride my bike to the university and put it in the compost pile. So that's just part of my weekly activity. But I agree, you have to be thoughtful about it. It's not just like running to the back door and throwing it out in the backyard. What else? Well, Phoebe, I'm going to ask you the question. While you all were away having your small group conversations, I asked Phoebe, what's the one thing that you hope this group walks away with from our discussion today? And Phoebe said,
an invitation to slow down. And I'm going to back that up with a photograph of, this is a nurse log. Has anybody ever heard of what a nurse log is? So when something falls, when a tree dies, oftentimes it serves as the source of renewal. Light is shed in the forest to offer up new growth, and you'll see all this new growth happening on this log. Sometimes it's when we decide to stop that anybody else can actually take up new things, which I think is a segue to what Jill and Jason might want to talk to you about.
So thank you for setting us up well, Phoebe. So with that image in mind, Jason and I and the coaching team would like you to know that we are taking Sabbath for the month of July and August. And so in that time of resting and being quiet, we invite you to find ways to recreate yourself, to connect with nature, to connect with one another, to take a nap. Phoebe, I missed that you put that in there, that's one of your favorite ways of recreating, or sleeping in, you said. Yes, there you go. Whatever it is, and we really look forward to gathering back together again on September 6th. If I'm not mistaken, Jason, please check the calendar for me. That will be the first Wednesday in September when we will gather back together again. It will be our 150th time, right? So I get to say that at the beginning, and we'll be having a special message coming to us from Bishop Eaton, who I ran into on the elevator today, by the way. I said that the doors open and she was standing there and she went, surprise! she's just so wonderful, and she made me laugh. So we can look forward to all of that. And while I know that this has been an anchor spot for many of us, coming back to the courageous leadership community week to week, you can listen to a recording if you need that connect time, right? Or reach out to one of your colleagues here one-to-one. But thank you for honoring our Sabbath time. We do hope to come back, and we are going to invite you in that first time. Not only will we do probably the small groups by topics, but we're going to invite sharing of what you did on summer vacation. And we want to hear your stories of restoration and how you too took time to recreate yourself. And yes, Janice, thank you for saying thank you to Phoebe. Phoebe, thank you. What a beautiful ministry that you have been shepherding for many years now, and you are making an impact. Each of you in this space right now who will listen to the recording know that you are valued. You are indeed loved, and I look forward to seeing you again in September. Thank you for all that you are and all that you do. God bless you, friends.
God bless you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thanks for having me. Enjoy Sabbath.
Thank